All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Innovation Alchemy. My name is Adam Castle. I'm the Director of Venture Services and Partnerships from WEtech Alliance. And today we're talking construction tech with three of the firms in Windsor-Essex doing big things in building our region. Housing is seen as one of the largest challenges of our generation, not just in Canada, but across our continent. There is an estimate of needing about 22 million new homes by the year 2030, and you're all working to tackle those things in infrastructure and housing in very different ways. I'm super excited to have this conversation today with you. So Sarah Cipkar, first up from Resimate, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
We have David Mill from Scelta Technologies. David, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And Scott from Optimotive Technologies. Scott, thank you so much.
Appreciate the opportunity.
So we're going to start with background, how you ended up where you are, where kind of the genesis was of your current journeys, and how you kind of found yourselves in this moment. And Sarah, maybe we might start with you because you've had a winding road, my friend.
Very true. I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but suffice to say, I actually built my own backyard home, so an additional dwelling unit. It took over a year. It was really complex and difficult, and I thought there has to be a better way. So my company is really grounded in trying to deliver missing middle infill housing. So really helping the average homeowner be able to add a unit. Maybe we're starting to branch into fourplexes and sixplexes as well. And so really kind of that missing little, our company is really dedicated both from a tech side and also from a modular and prefab side of putting all the pieces together for people.
Very cool. And ton of attention right now on smaller homes, ADUs, those types of things that are seen as additive to the construction process, but are making such a huge impact when it comes to providing places for people to live.
Yeah, 100%. It can be just as complex to add one like backyard home as it is to, do like a 12 unit kind of condo building or something like that. So our goal is really streamlining that process to be able to make it more easier, essentially. Yeah.
Very cool. Amazing. David, what are you guys doing in construction?
We help construction companies dial in sales, marketing, and operations.
Awesome.
I started working in construction project management right out of school, working for a successful local developer and general contractor, and quickly realized that these hundreds of millions of dollars worth of projects were being managed on spreadsheets, emails, text messages, group chats. So we set out on a mission 2 years ago to streamline that process. And really, our definition of innovation is alignment, and alignment across all key stakeholders in construction.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Scott, one of the biggest challenges within this space is focused on labor, and that either we can't get enough of it or the labor that we do have is too overstretched or thinned out. How is Optimotive tackling that challenge?
Yeah, so at Optimotive, we build robots for construction, mining, and oil and gas, and it's a lot of our conversation is surrounding labor, getting things done, right? So from that perspective, think of us almost like the Roomba of construction. Like when you have a Roomba, it takes a task away from you. That's the same thing that our robots do. And as you said, like the workers are so stretched thin, and they're essentially brought in to do one core thing, but then they get loaded up with a million different side tasks. Yeah. So what we come in with a picture is with our robots is we'll go in, we'll start to do task automation to take more off their plate so they can focus on getting the real things done on their construction site, like hanging the drywall, finishing the drywall, making sure that everything's running smoothly, laying conduit and things of that nature, versus having to run around and do these side quests that a lot of GCs get stuck with.
Very cool. So maybe I'll start with you on this question, which is like, what is your current understanding? What is the state of construction in Canada right now?
For sure. Yeah, projects are booming. A lot of momentum happening, a lot of government spending, but also on the developer side of things and the private side of things. As you pointed towards, there's a fundamental lack of housing in Canada. Housing is stupidly expensive. Rent rates are high. And that's in large due to a lack of inventory. There's just not enough options for people to go out and get towards. So we're seeing with the developers that we're working with, I'll use the example of one based in Waterloo called Vive Developments. They're building tons of high-rise builds, and like they're stacked with projects for I think almost up to the next decade. So from that perspective, the bottleneck is not let's find a project and build it. It's actually building it, right? Yeah. It's the actual boots on the ground, getting things done, putting everything up is where their challenges lie the most. And that's where we come in. We can help them build things faster because we allow those team members to work on more meaningful things, and we can automate away things like cleaning up the construction site. Yeah. We're using our Scrubbles platform with them, or data capture. Like they would have their general managers running around on site with an iPhone, just like snapping photos of everything, trying to figure out what's going on, when that general manager should be focused on more much meaningful tasks. Yeah. So that's where we came came into the picture, and that's where we're helping them out.
Like hyper inefficient to
Totally.
some clarity and some,
Yeah, like the construction industry is ripe with inefficiencies.
Yeah.
And we're at this exciting moment where a lot of the general contractors are now realizing that.
Yeah.
I use the analogy, like if you looked at the factory environment 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, it was the same thing. It was human labor doing repetitive tasks, mundane tasks, and taking a whole lot of time to get things done.
Yeah.
But then you saw the advent of automation. You got robot welding cells, you got little robots zipping around moving things, and construction is going through that wake-up moment now where those gains that were found in the factory environment are starting to move outdoors through the use of little robots like ours and the robots that other companies are providing.
That's awesome. And I know we talk a lot about this. David, you and I have talked a lot about this, is this idea that, when you're doing something like a build, it's no different from manufacturing. And what we're really seeing the advent of is this growth in the process that's involved in that, and really honing in that process and using technology to help along that process. And to your point, that's where manufacturing was 10 years ago or 15 years ago, when it was fully manual labor and you're working with lines. Now you're working on robots and transfer systems and all of those things that make that process much more efficient. And we have an efficiency problem in Canada. So David, how is your team starting to tackle that?
Yeah, to build off Scott's point a little bit, funny enough, one of our platforms, some of our biggest clients are manufacturers. Mm-hmm. And we didn't actually set out to build software for manufacturing. Yeah. But I had a manufacturer just happen to be at one of my presentations and pulled me aside and said, you know what, building a custom tool or an automotive is very similar to building a custom home. I mean, there's many steps involved, there's many parties involved, many people have to stay aligned. Do you think I could use your software platform to build my machines? Or sure, right? We just anonymized kind of the naming structures of the features and just made it more generalized, and then ended up managing these large, multifaceted tool builds for across North American companies, which is really cool.
Really cool.
But same thing with Scott, with the developers that we work with, a lot of units that we're seeing right now, because there's so much demand, as you mentioned in Waterloo, there's so many sky rises being built. I think the real differentiating factor right now is the story that developers are telling. Because people aren't just buying units anymore, right? They're buying into stories, they're buying into feelings, they're buying into brands.
Right.
So the approach that we take with all of our developer clients is turning their developments into a brand, turning it into a story, right? Because they have far more retention with buyers and people who are looking to lease when they can buy into something that they're proud of and something that they really want to live in. Yeah. Because there's so many options out there now. So really, with our visualization platforms, with our client portals, with our red map technology where you can see all these different developments, we're noticing a shift in builders care a lot more in the way that their buildings are being portrayed, the way that their story is being told. So
really cool. And so we've got massive infrastructure, the work that's getting done when things are being built. You've got a platform that really helps with that early stage of like validating whether or not something should be built or how it should be built or what the demand is for those types of things. And then you have people who have stories, right? We're talking about the branding. The story out there about ADUs today is that they look easy to do on the outside, but the minute you dig into them, it is incredibly difficult to get done. And so how is Resimate really digging in to help with that?
Yeah, I mean, if you take the example of like a car being in the, automotive space as well in Windsor, and you think about what it takes to get that car, through the manufacturing process, everything, we do not do the same thing at all with houses. It's actually wild. The home building process is very artisanal, and the same is true with ADUs. And so imagine if instead you could go to maybe like a home dealership and there's a home readily available on demand. You just customize, maybe move some walls around, you know that it fits in your backyard, you have everything pre-checked. That's kind of the vision that Resimate's building towards. It's really that catalog or that kind of like home that you can see yourself in, and then you're able to project it into your backyard. Or maybe in the case of developers who are on the smaller side, a 4-plex or a 6-plex, they're like, well, I can easily have this vacant lot, 6-plex there in, let's say, 3 to 6 months. And so I from the storytelling side of things, if you can expedite things and really showcase, what's possible, people are much more likely to adopt these new types of, I'll say, technology. But it's really about, we have a housing crisis. Families often have a reason why they need that unit, but they have no ability to get to that final outcome. And so, it's really about kind of solving that process and getting like that on-demand kind of building system, I think, front and center.
Yeah, you kind of come into the messy middle of it and say, like, here's how you can actually move through this process.
Yeah.
So we've got a target. I think it's 500,000 homes every year until 2030 that we've now kind of announced from a federal level. I want to ask all of you, like, what do you think it's going to take to get us there?
Yeah, so our team has actually been working on the housing design catalog with CMHC, and I think that kind of mentality is really what's needed, but I think you need to take it a step further, and all of those designs need to be prefab and modular.
Okay.
And we need a whole supply chain system that's able to build, I'll say almost 80% off-site, then just gets assembled on-site. It needs to be very, very smooth, and I think you also need municipalities to kind of get out of the way, but I won't go down that path too much, but I think you need like a fully integrated system that allows for these types of housing, and you need to see it more like a catalog of sorts.
Yeah. Now you're working with the manufacturers in this space that are doing a lot of the modularized stuff. Tell me a little bit about the depth that we have in Canada, and do you see opportunity in a place like Windsor that's been known for 150 years, 200 years to make things?
Yeah, great question. So right now, I think less than 5% of homes are built in a prefab or modular fashion. So it's a very small portion of the industry. A lot of it is very localized, very dominated by big developers or builders. But yeah, right here in Windsor, we have the ability to manufacture homes. We actually, I toured the Lanex factory, and they have their new metal lock system, and they're basically building steel structure modules to be able to be used in homes. They can be used in other things as well, but specifically residential units. And so we're looking towards those kind of manufacturers who can take those units from the factory, finish them, deliver them as modules, and then they're basically installed in less than a couple of days. So that's kind of, I think, where the construction industry really needs to head.
That's awesome. David, I know you deal with a lot of the people in the process of this work, from the builders, the subcontractors, the developers themselves. What do you see as the big sticking points right now to the productivity that we need to see?
Well, the first point would be what Sarah's doing with Resimate and what Scott's doing with Optimotive. I mean, that's what we need in terms of speed of builds and then speed of data retention on site. But what we're just trying to help is in the middle of the alignment, transparency, and communication, really, with our portal platforms, with our visualization platforms, so that we can ensure that the 15, 20, 30 people on site, whatever it is, sometimes hundreds, have all the information they need readily available and that they're all on the same page. Creating the transparency for the buyers, creating the transparency for the municipalities who are looking at where the next development's going to be, and then as well with the developers so that they know what the community wants. So where we're coming in is in the communication, alignment, and transparency piece of construction.
Very cool. And Scott, where do you see kind of robots fitting in to help with this? Beyond just there's the easy productivity pieces that you're going to immediately help with. But what is it allowing people to do that they couldn't otherwise when they're worrying about those menial or repetitive or unsafe tasks that they were currently doing?
Yeah, from a high level perspective, I mean, if the target is to build 500,000 homes, like it needs to be attack on all fronts, right? Like it's got to be regulatory, it's got to be build, it's got to be speed and quality, right?
Yep.
You could go extremely fast, but you could have low quality. So like if you look at China as an example, like housing in China, they can hammer them out, but then they're extremely low quality. Where our robots come into the picture, if we're trying to achieve speed, is to ensure that the quality is there.
Yeah.
Whether it be 3D scanning the entirety of the build to make sure the concrete footings are correct, make sure the walls went up as expected, and like give those check marks and definitive proof points of data saying, yep, this was done right.
Yep.
That allows them to move a whole lot quicker, right? One of the examples I'll give, I won't name the exact GC, but they were building a substantial project and they had issues with their concrete footings, and they didn't realize till 3 weeks later when their 3D scanning team came out to go and scan it.
Yeah.
So yeah, they were moving fast and they were holding at a good pace, but they had an error in the build that then they said, shoot, we got to go back 3 weeks worth of progress and rip it all out and restart. So we can live in a world where we have robots constantly intaking data such as 3D scanning and inspection to say, yes, these builds are good, go, 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 keep moving as fast as you can. That's going to help a whole lot in that story of trying to get to that 500K target.
That's really cool because there's a thread here now where it's like we need to build in these opportunities for things that are modularized. So like really get the process standpoint. We need to make sure that communication is paramount and that people are really connected across every function of what's being built. And then we need ways to get data to where it needs to go so that decisions can get made in time versus this technical debt that happens when we're cutting corners. And I know there's like, I'm gonna get this quote wrong, but it's like you can have something that's fast and cheap, and what's the third one?
Quality.
Is it quality, high quality? You can have two of those, but you can't have all three. But we're really tackling a problem that requires us to have all three at this point. And so that, to me, in my mind, and what we're seeing here is like it really does take a technological lens to help bring together the elements that are kind of missing from that space. Just super interesting. So when you look at kind of the impact that each of your businesses have had to this point, what are you most proud of in terms of how you've affected that type of challenge, or those challenges that we're kind of seeing in front of us? And Scott, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so some of the biggest impacts that we've seen, it's great to see the business metrics of like, yay, we got construction site completed better, yay, we caught an error, things like that. But where I get the most satisfaction out of it is when a worker runs up to me on site and says like, hey, what is this thing?
Yeah.
And I get to like inform them about what it is. And then I've had so many stories of workers coming back to me. It's like, oh, I hated that part of my job. That sucked. Like anytime my boss would give it to me, it's like, oh, here we go. I got to go do like a data collection task as an example. Like we were on this massive solar farm out in central Alberta, and this lady comes up to me all curious about the robot. And she ended up saying like, yeah, like that was my job yesterday and I did not want to do it. Like I had to go take photos of a skid steer and go take some photos of broken panels. Like it's just like, ugh. And so like keeping the workers motivated and excited is going to help us with that 500K target, right? If everyone's excited to show up, get the job done, and is there for what they signed up for, and you can take away all those kind of side quests, it makes that employee workforce that much more effective and that much more efficient and happy to be there.
So cool. David, I know you've moved into this space where there wasn't a lot of technology before, especially in the space where you're really focusing on, and you've managed to get sales meetings that like no one else has, and build trust with individuals and businesses that hasn't been done before. I imagine there's a lot to be proud of there, but what is it that kind of sticks out in your mind of what you've accomplished so far?
I would say just the feeling when our users or clients come to us and they say how much more dialed in they feel in all aspects of their life. So even from work standpoint, knowing that their communication is dialed in, their workers on site know exactly what they need to do. It's really satisfying seeing too, like the almost hundreds of thousands of data points coming in a day. So all the daily logs that are submitted, all the hours that are submitted, all the photos, the basic progress of the project. It's really cool to see that come in real time.
Yeah.
A new project pop up on our radar, on our map, or new buyers submit a new order. It's that satisfaction of seeing our technology actually being used in an industry where they're adverse to technology. That's very satisfying. And then just how that translates to the rest of their lives, right? Because they feel like they're dialed in at work, and I know exactly what I need to do every day at work. Their quality of life is increased. I mean, I remember a contractor coming to me and just saying how much more time he gets to spend with his kids and his wife. And I just thought that was such a cool moment because yes, we're doing technology, but two, this person's life is affected by
there's a big change
how much less they have to do during the day.
Yeah. And Sarah, I know like you're literally giving people a place to live, and you're providing families this opportunity to bring together multi-generational sometimes and really create a space where people can be together. What is it that kind of sticks out to you as being something that swells you with pride? Yeah,
consistently our whole entire team would say this. We have so many projects that are multi-generational, where it's the parents or the kids, and one is going to live in the backyard home, and truthfully building those relationships and seeing the final outcome when they actually like see the home and they're like really excited about it. And honestly, I have this one client that I'm working with right now, and I'm like, by the end of this, we're gonna have beers and we're gonna like sit out on the porch and we're genuinely friends by the end of it. And so I think that really being able to deliver units in an efficient way, but also in a way that truly meets people's like social need. Right now people don't see a lot of options. They're like the threshold to home ownership is very high. People are worried about living, their aging parents living in a long-term care home. There's a lot of different use cases for backyard homes. And so really just being able to see all of those pieces kind of come together for the individual. Our whole team, that's kind of our celebration moments.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Well, I know that you're all on, is it your first venture? Technically, for all of you, for the most part, for this, which means there's a lot of lessons that come with all this stuff. Almost like a constant drip of like, oh, I had to learn that the hard way, kind of thing. So curious, like, what are some of the big takeaways? And David, maybe I'll start on your end.
I mean, a big one was learning how to do payroll properly. I'm being specific. Like remittances,
hyper specific,
sort of thing. That was definitely a learning curve. But knock on wood, we're around that now. But yeah, learning how to do that, just, I feel like when you're early stage in a startup, and just to speak for myself, you have to get a team of people who are all in, and you may not be able to compensate them to what their worth or their value, right? So getting that early buy-in from the team members that I had, I wouldn't say was the biggest challenge because I'm lucky to have such great people around me, but just kind of getting over that insecurity and hump of like, do these people, are they going to be with me for the long term, right? And just will this, because the company relies on the great team that we have.
Yeah.
So just making sure that my team was taken care of in the early days, and growing with me, and just seeing how much of myself, if I look back at myself 2 years ago versus look at some of the team members 2 years ago, it's like we're different people.
Yeah.
So I think that was probably the scariest thing, but also the most satisfying thing now 2 years later.
For sure. And I know all of you have actually grown teams, and that's something that's a little bit outside of the norm from our region in terms of startups, is it's not something that everyone's able to do. And some of you had to look further afield, and some of you have moved into different countries in order to do that. Before we dive more into the lessons, like, tell me about that. What is it like building a team as a first-time founder?
Yeah, like the example that I give, and I learned this from a guy named Palmer Luckey. He started Oculus and a big defense company, and I was chatting with him about it. It's like, you should never be the best person with anything at your company. That's a sign of failure.
Yeah.
So the recent lesson that I'll give is, like, I was historically the best mechanical guy. Like, I would design the robots, design their enclosures, design everything like that, and it would take my focus away from what truly it means to be the founder of the company, which is got to make sure money's in the tank, and you got to make sure that customers are happy and things are rolling.
Yeah.
So I'd get pulled on these side quests of working on mechanical tasks. And so having that ability to, and no ego, to release control of the thing that was historically what defined you is an important lesson that you got to learn really early days, or else it's inherently going to inhibit the company.
Oh, for sure. I found that tough in my own career. Like, get out of the way, stop being the one to do everything, and be able to really take joy and satisfaction in seeing the team that you've built go off and do those things, and realizing it's still a reflection of you, but kind of a different kind.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with Scott. It's like a lesson in humility. And I see now my role as like steering the ship and listening a lot and making sure the whole team is rowing in the same direction. That's a big challenge, because I have a remotely distributed team. So there used to be a few of us in Windsor. Now there's only me, and we kind of stretch all the way to Montreal, and then we have actually a team member in Vancouver as well. And so that remoteness, or the nature of the job is challenging to overcome. And so I'm, I don't always succeed, but I'm trying to check in with everybody, make sure that everybody's kind of making sure that we're, aligned in the vision. And I realized I had to transition to that very quickly, because I was like the ADU expert, but then I realized, I don't know all the zoning bylaws and all the permit applications across all of Ontario. So I have to rely on like a team who's more, in those areas and has more expertise. And so, it was a humbling experience for sure when you realize you need to kind of take your hands off the wheel there.
Oh, for sure. I think a lot of it comes down to trust too, like trusting the people that are around you and that you've built in. And I know you guys do a lot of really cool work around shaping with your projects. Do you want to talk a little bit about that in terms of like how you've started to frame up those projects with your team members? Yeah,
I got to give credit to a founder named Jason Fried of Basecamp. As one of my idol founders. I've been following him very closely. And oftentimes we would sit in, we call it sort of like our think tank in the office. If you've been to our office, it's just the glass walls with writing on the walls. That's where we come up with a lot of the features. We come up with a lot of the new app initiatives. And we'd spend hours in there, right? And we would draw these super complex Figmas, and we create wireframes and click-throughs. And then maybe we'd jump over to Canva because it was too slow on Figma. And we're like, this is just, it's taking too long, right? Because we're all about speed. And as an early company, if you don't deliver fast, you're just going to lose their interest. So we started this new exercise called shaping. So you start with a fat marker. And if you can't draw out the UX UI of what you're trying to build with a fat marker, it's too complicated. There's too many buttons, there's too many details.
It's good.
So we start with the big marker. And then we immediately, what are our no-goes right away? So we'll think of all the things we want to build, and then we'll be very diligent and like, well, we have to give away things even if we want them.
Right.
And just really simplifying it and running it into, we have 6 weeks. So we limit ourselves. You only get 6 weeks to build this. So if we can't build it in 6 weeks, we have to cut it back. And that was really hard because like there's a lot of features in there that you really want, but they're just nice to have.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough not to listen to customers on everything too.
Totally.
It's like, what's the difference between feedback and a trend versus like a one-off that someone says they'll pay for, but then they end up not. So it's like a tough thing to kind of learn and go through.
Yeah,
it totally is. And like we had that early days in our story too, where it's like you think like every single customer feedback will be the standard for the entire industry.
Yeah.
But then we learned the tough lesson early days that you really got to float it by everybody first before you spend tons of money and time on engineering something that's inherently a one-off. It's so important to track it and make sure that it is an actual full-blown industry problem and not just a one-off customer. Especially in our game, like the way that we work is we don't charge stupid amounts of money per robot. So if it's a one-off, like it doesn't make sense.
Right.
And like I could say probably for all of us, we're looking for massive scalability. We're not looking for one-offs. We're not bespoke shops where you're doing a one-time thing and charging hundreds of thousands of dollars for it. There is companies that do that, but they're ultimately not the big fish in the sea, right?
Right.
It's hard to find that sweet spot of also knowing where you want to go and trying to bring your customers there, but also not being too far ahead of them.
Yeah.
Like we found like with modular ADUs, it's like we realize there's actually a lot of customization that people want, and we're trying to say no, but at the same time it's their house. And so, how do you limit? Do you move a wall? Can you add another bathroom? Is that changing it too much?
Yeah.
But then also maybe moving more towards a model where these are just the way that they're built, and you get to choose the colors and the finishes, kind of like a condo building that's already been done. But people see ADUs a little bit differently, and so we're trying to find that sweet spot of customization to allow the customers to be kind of brought forward, but also standardization to be able to scale. And quite frankly, that's still a challenge for us.
It's always a challenge, and it never ends. And like we find the same thing too, where like customization can be the death of you.
Yeah.
If you really run the numbers on, it's like, wow, we're gonna lose a ton of money if we do this, right?
Yeah, not just in the actual product, but your time, you're invested. Yeah,
for sure.
And just sitting around the table with visionaries of their companies too, right? It's like we have to communicate our ideas to our team, right? And let them run with it. Because as much as we want to have a hand in every step of it, that's another rule of shaping is once you've created the shape, you actually just let it go.
Yeah.
You don't go back and say, oh no, we're going to change that. No, you have to bet on it.
Yeah.
And that bet's locked.
Yeah.
And it's really hard for, visionary founders to just be like, all right, I can't touch it for 6 weeks.
Yep.
Yes.
As much as you want to.
Yeah.
So at the end of 6 weeks, you would know if the bet is lost or won, kind of a thing, if it worked or didn't work.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's nice for the engineers too because they have an end in sight, right? It's sort of demotivating when you work on something with no end date.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. That just never expires.
Yeah,
That's so
just a
true.
pile
Yeah.
of work that kind of never ends.
Yeah, people
Yeah.
burn out and then they lose interest and they can start having health challenges and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Like we saw
yeah.
that early days in our stuff. We run our guys really hard because you have to in the early days of a company. But
Yeah, yeah.
you
Yeah.
got to have that like start, stop, end, celebrate, right? You
Yeah.
got to
Yeah.
take time
Yeah,
off.
yeah.
You got to go hang out with the team and do whatever your team loves to do. If
Yeah.
that's driving around cool cars or if it's going skiing or whatever it
Yeah,
is, like
yeah.
you have to have those like end like celebration moments and take time to reflect and say, wow, we did it.
Yes, yeah.
We can
even
also
if
just
they're
hang.
brief, right?
Yeah.
Like even if there's just like a momentary pause to
Yes.
say like, yeah, now we're still at the starting line.
Yes.
we're
Yeah.
starting line of
100%.
something
And also
else,
we
but-
still all like each other.
Yeah,
Yes, exactly.
Been through this last little, round, but here we are. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you all kind of touched on this idea that like you can't customize everything because
Mm-hmm.
that's not a scalable business. And I know that you're each dealing with it in really different ways. So I'm curious, like, how does that change? And I'll ask this to all of you. How does that change your sales approach? Because I imagine you have to change customer expectations and really customer behavior in order to get them to buy in to this idea that like, no, I know better.
Yeah, great question. I was actually talking about this with David a few weeks ago because we work with, I think, almost 8 different manufacturers. Wood frame, steel frame. Some are from Quebec, some are in Ontario. So not only is the product very different, but then what the outcome is, the style is very different. And so our sales team is really, really good at narrowing in on what the homeowner wants in terms of like their budget, but also their like what they're using it for, what's important to them, what kind of style. So that is still a human job.
Yeah.
Like that is still very much something that we've tried to automate. We have a digital catalog. We thought about improving it, but it's actually the human to human conversation where you really kind of suss out, okay, what does this person want? And then from there, we actually do an on-site assessment to then be like, is this unit even possible? And so really you're trying to narrow the funnel, I think, at every step. Obviously, I'm very direct to consumer, right? So it's a little bit different, but it really is about kind of that narrowing to get somebody to their ideal. And then if you can't get there, then we kind of start to go in the customization route, or then we start to then say, okay, what can this manufacturer move these walls? Can they add a second story maybe?
Right.
Can they do all that? So we try to get them as far down the line as possible with our standard units. And then thankfully, our manufacturers are pretty good at, customizing and making what they actually want. So
Very cool.
Yeah.
What about you? How does that change sales for you?
Well, I'm going to take a stance and say that in the early days, if you're a bootstrap company, you almost to get your first few clients, you
Yeah,
kind of
you do
have
anything.
to be customized.
Yeah.
I'll say no.
Whatever you want, we'll build it. That's
Yeah.
the approach that we took, right? But I think over time, nowadays we just came up, thanks to Adam, we came up with this really strong intake for our clients now, because we've done so many different platforms for so many clients, 700 million in developments now. We kind of have an idea of what clients really want. So we do a heat map analysis of, okay, what are our most popular deliverable features, right? And then we kind of list out our clients and just put X's for every time that a client picks something. And you start to see these red dots where it gets like really strong and vibrant colors. It's like, well, that feature has to stay, right? And another example back to shaping, Jason Freed talks about the calendar. So a customer asks you to build a calendar. There's, as software developers, there's probably 12 different ways you could deliver a calendar, right? But it's like, what does that client really want out of that calendar? Do they want to book meeting times? Do they just want to see meeting times? Do they want to share calendar invites? So I think really, if you can define the problem better, you might not have to customize. So I think the challenge is in really defining the problem before you choose to just customize just to fix something.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And that's like, to flip it, that's how we work with startups here, is this idea that like everyone that walks in our door tells us that they want funding is primarily like the number one thing. But when you ask what it's for, that could be 12 different things. And oftentimes now I don't even ask about the funding. It's like, well, what do you need it for? And then we'll assess on, that might not necessarily be a raise. That could be, you need a subsidy to hire on some people, or you need some interns, or there's a million different ways, I think, to extend runway for a company. And it's not always just about capital. And so similar to what you're saying is like, we really dig in to understand the why underneath the request. And sometimes it's something that they're not actually asking for. They don't know they need. And we can kind of like uncover it for them and say, okay, but what if you focus on this area a little bit and see where that takes you? And oftentimes it leads them down a path that may not necessarily require immediate funding, but definitely hits on that same problem and same solution needs. So
yeah, sometimes you can't just throw money at a problem. I know it's like cliche to say, but our team, we were a part of the Housing Supply Challenge, and we threw a lot of money at different problems because CMHC was asking us to solve them within this challenge. And we realized coming out of it that like, oh, there are some things that money isn't solving here. It's actually, X, Y, or Z. And so being able to kind of have a more objective stance where like, what is the problem that you're actually trying to solve? And that's something that our team has been kind of going through as we exited the challenge, where we're like, okay, there's a lot of problems we were trying to solve. What are the ones that are actually reasonable to solve for customers in this, in the supply chain, everything like that. So
that's really cool. Scott, I know you've stayed away from public funding to a certain extent, and you went with the private funding. How has that allowed you to focus on the problems that you want to solve versus challenges or problems that are kind of like more publicly identified?
For sure. So from our perspective, we did navigate away from the public funding route in the early days of it. Institutional VCs and investors, especially from the States, just move so much faster. It's like make a few phone calls, money is wired, and it's there. Versus in the early days, especially like going for the public funding grants, like it takes a lot of work. It's not something that just can snap the fingers and it happens. So to that, our strategy was go for the VC dollars first and then start to extract funding dollars to help extend the runway of said VC dollars using things that do take historically a little bit more time. And that approach has allowed us to kind of clear our heads and really focus on what is meaningful. And what is meaningful in our game is robots in the field doing things with great customers. So it allows the whole entire team to focus up a whole lot more, move a whole lot quicker.
Very cool. I've talked a lot about on this podcast in the last few episodes, really about how, Windsor-Essex is this region of makers. We've been doing this here for, 250 years. That's not changing, but what we make is, and how we do it is. And you were all, I think, really great examples of that as being on the cutting edge and the cusp of what's next for this region. So I want to ask you all, like, look into your crystal balls. What do you see in terms of direction for this space? What do you see in terms of, what's going to be made here in the next 150, 250 years? What do you hope to see made here in the next little bit?
Yeah, I think it's going to be, if you look at Windsor-Essex historically, it's usually a trickle down of what happens in Detroit, right? Like Detroit auto was the thing and it trickled into the Canadian region, and we are the first kind of hub when you enter into Canada. If you draw a line up from the States, you hit us, right? We're usually the first ones, and we're the most south
That's a great
Canada.
point. First place in Canada for automotive, first place for distilleries as well, which is a huge one too. And then obviously ag has always been
Exactly.
Here,
So if you look at what's happening in Detroit, you are seeing a resurgence in many ways of both infrastructure spending. You see a resurgence of development for homes. You're seeing a lot of startups starting to navigate to the region. The prime example I'd use is New Lab. New Lab is a facility that's set up next to Michigan Central Station, and just the sink of talent there is outstanding. And while Detroit historically struggled for a while there, and over the past maybe 20 years, you're seeing this crazy resurgence, and a lot of companies now moving back to the central Detroit region, when historically it kind of all spread out and you got away from the downtown core. It's kind of all almost like a fracking analogy. It's all kind of seeping back into that. So if you look at that analogy, I think there's gonna be a lot more startup activity. There's gonna be a lot more people building new things, as you see sitting at this table. This is some of the prime examples, and Pixame and companies like that. I think that's gonna be a continuous trend. You're gonna see more people taking risks, getting out there and trying new things, because we're starting to see density of success stories, right? Like historically for Windsor, like it was hard to point towards like people trying brand new things. There was a lot of traditional businesses, family involvement, things of that nature, and it's kind of the old guard per se. But I think with the people sitting at this table, you're starting to see that mold break, and you're starting to see new people trying new ideas, because they can point to people like us and others like us saying, it's possible, we can do it here. And you're seeing that in Detroit as well, with a lot of great companies starting to pop out.
That's an interesting point, and one I think I see a lot right now is this idea that you're tapping into, and I think all of you have great examples of this, tapping into legacy industries and helping them kind of rise to where the next thing is going to be.
I thought you were going to use the term disrupt. I feel like we hear it all the time. No. I was waiting for it.
No, but and I think it moves, to be honest, beyond that disruption. You can't at a certain lens. I think, people talk about diversification from our manufacturing space, and that's important. But we're always going to be within that realm of manufacturing. That's what we do best here. It's just about, how do you take those skills and find complementary things to do with them, type piece. But David, what do you think is next? Where do you hope to see this region?
Well, specifically in my domain in real estate development, looking into the red map crystal ball, because we've tracked about 118 developments that are coming in the next decade. And I see a lot of multi-unit, a lot of purpose-built rentals, and Sarah and I talked about this, but a lot less custom building and a lot more package-based building. One of our first softwares we ever launched, you could customize a home 250,000 different ways, and we thought it was the next coolest thing. Never got used that much. Right? It wasn't until we distilled it down to packages for finished selections by designers, by builders, that people actually started making decisions. So I think we're going to see a lot more geared towards clarity around decision making. I think in the next few years with developers, at least what we see is they have to offer a unit. They have to offer something that's affordable. Affordability is key, and I think the only way that affordability is going to happen is, building prices aren't necessarily going to change, right? It's companies like Scott's, it's building methods like Sarah's, it's alignment that we're providing through Scelta that's really going to make these units more affordable. Because I don't see costs going down per se. I just think that there's ways that we can make affordability more readily available.
Yeah, I think you make a good point in that when you're dealing with survival mode of people, that the luxury of making a choice on every single finish, every single material, it goes out the window. It's more about putting a roof over heads than it is about, the custom granite countertop that you could potentially have. And when more people are stretched thin from a spending and cost of living perspective, you really need those middle of the road type solutions that give them some choice and some autonomy, but also is affordable and scalable in that way. So I think that's a really cool point.
Yeah, it's a tough industry too. Like there's only so many levers you can pull on to make things happen. We're not software companies, or rather the industry itself is not software. Yes, you can use software systems to benefit it, but when you look at it, we need to be making changes now that are going to have impact in a decade, right? You can't just suddenly pop up a new build and all of a sudden housing prices are going to crash, right? And everyone can buy a house. That's not going to happen. It is a relatively slow-moving industry because of the scale of things that have to be built and the money that needs to be spent. So it's about making bets now, introducing technology now to better unlock the future.
I think that's so key because there's always this understanding or this expectation that tech and innovation moves really quickly. And it does, from a moment to moment perspective, it does. But to see cultural change or industry change or country change, that takes a lot. It's a lot longer of an event horizon. It takes a lot more patience, and that moves beyond things like political cycles and even sales cycles in many cases.
It's lifetimes.
Yeah. And so it's just interesting that you're all tackling a problem that like is not necessarily for you to solve. It's going to be the generations that come after us that'll continue to have to solve these issues.
It's the standing on the shoulders of giants analogy, right?
Yeah.
Like it's going to be the future.
Yeah.
Well, I think to add on to that, it's really, I think some of the work that we do, which is not tangible, is cultural mobilization.
Yep.
It's helping people think about housing differently. We're very used to the North American lifestyle where you reach a certain point and you buy a home, and that's like a marker of success. And I still think that is true, but I think we need to be maybe shifting our idea to what is a good quality of life? What lifestyle do I want? And I do think, I'll say the Gen Zs and younger are starting to think this way. And they're not as concerned about necessarily owning something. We have a lot of younger staff, and they've said like, yeah, it's not really a priority for me. Like I really enjoy having X, Y, and Z in my lifestyle. And to do that feels like I'm going to have to work really, really hard, save a lot, sacrifice. And I don't know that I'm really wanting to do that. And so I think there's this cultural mobilization piece where we accept that, you know what, there could be really amazing housing units that are purpose-built rentals. And that's how somebody and other parts of the world live that way. And we can have, our investments elsewhere, or we can, do things differently. And so garden suites are inherently a rental unit with a main property. And just even that sense of connection is a different cultural lens as well.
Right.
That connection to people, how close you are in proximity, et cetera. So I think, to answer your original question, I think it is this really big cultural mobilization piece that we're trying to tackle as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And such a huge thing to be aware of and tap into, because it does take time and it does take a lot of effort. So.
Yeah, it's painting a picture. I have a backyard home, and I'm genuinely friends with my tenant. We have a little shared courtyard. We do all that. And it was like mind-blowing for some people. They were like, oh, your neighbors are going to hate this. And I'm like, actually, it's been the total opposite. And so it's really kind of having proof cases that show that like we can think about housing differently. We can solve this problem. It doesn't have to be these, single family detached homes. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I live in one, but it's also, changing to how people connect to their space, I think, too.
Yeah. What I'm kind of getting out of this is that it's not just about building the homes, although that has to happen. Infrastructure has to be there, but it's also changing attitudes around how we live in communities.
Exactly.
And what that paradigm has been for our generation and the generation before us of like the Canadian dream. And it's the white picket fence and the single detached home. That doesn't necessarily have to be what the future holds, but that also doesn't mean a degradation of the Canadian way of life, or the
100%.
quality of life.
Yeah.
It can be different and still be really fulfilling and really connected.
Yeah, one of my co-founders is actually based out of Montreal, and it's actually a really valuable perspective to have because they've already been kind of living this way. They have a lot more plexes. They focus much more on like their external environment, have really great public spaces, and it means there's less focus on having your kind of palace home, and it's much more focus on human connection. And I think if we can start looking at housing through the lens of human connection, whether it's telling the stories with branding or even, making the process more efficient and seeing how technology can play a role, it really kind of enhances that overall quality of life. So, yeah.
I think even from, as a parent, I know you are as well, we were raised as like bedroom kids. And now there's this movement of like, they're living room kids. And this idea that you're just not living within this bubble of space around you at all times, that it become a normal thing, but it was also very isolating and also very extractive to like the creativity and connectivity of families. So it's neat to see that's kind of like permeating through everything right now.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, thank you all so much for having this conversation with me. It was just awesome and enlightening, and I love talking to all of you. It's so cool to see the stuff that you're building and that you're pushing towards, and this really is an interesting moment, I think, in time and in history, in Canadian history, specifically for our city, and to see you all building what you are is just so inspiring, and I'm so grateful to be on the journey with all of you and have seen it. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for all that WEtech has done to support all of us. I know we all feel really grateful, so thanks for that, Adam.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we'll talk soon. Thanks.
Thank you.